Hi, Phil Aston here from Now Spinning Magazine with another episode of Music Biz Chat. I've done quite a few videos recently about the music business, about what it's like to be a musician now. And of course, I had that fantastic podcast with Andy Edwards just a few days ago, which was proved to be very popular. And what Andy was saying, of course, could be seen as quite controversial depending on where you're sitting. But I do feel, as I said in the interview, that I do believe that the subscription model is very important. Obviously, Andy talked about saying that vinyl and CDs, they're pushed out the side. It's all about subscription. It's about YouTube. It's about Patreon. It's about Bandcamp. Obviously, Now Spinning Magazine is a platform that's all about physical music. And Andy did say that obviously he loves CDs and he loves buying vinyl. But what I want to say in this particular episode is just how important the physical format is, but especially the bounce back of the CD. And I've said before that it is a niche area now, physical media, which is why both me and Andy have said the subscription model and making sure you've got other revenue streams is important to make it full-time a musician. But obviously, as music fans, supporting an artist, not everyone can subscribe to every band they'd like. So buying physical media is the best way of getting closer to the artist and supporting them. So what I'm going to say in this episode is give you some statistics. Now, my stats are always based on the UK album chart primarily. So I'm not looking at Billboard. So those of you in America can obviously put in the comments what you know from over there. So what I talk about is based on my insight, because my background is in marketing, and obviously all the contacts I have with the PR companies, the record companies I talk to, and a lot of the artists I talk to and I'm involved in since I started this. And I also subscribe to Music Week, which is the UK music trade magazine, which of course is very much focused on record companies. And we know that you can now you can do it yourself. There are certain aspects, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is going to be interesting for musicians who are doing it completely on their own. And this is why I think there are bridges being built in every direction. So the first person that I want to quote is the managing director, Martin Goldschmidt from Cooking Vinyl. Now, I reviewed quite a few things from Cooking Vinyl. I think one of the most recent ones was the Alan Parsons Project Super Deluxe set for Pyramid. But Cooking Vinyl also did that fantastic box set for, what's his name? It's gone. It's gone from my head. And will it come back? It might do. Will it come back? Will it come back to me if I keep looking for it? Not coming back at the moment, is it? Billy Bragg. Billy Bragg box set, which I reviewed, which was fantastic. Anyway, they've also had tremendous success with Shed 7. And he was recently interviewed by Music Week about how he feels that the physical market is. Because overall, it's about 15% of the overall album sales. But in that niche, in that 15%, the people that press CDs and vinyl are seeing huge growth. But the focus here is on the humble CD. He says, Martin says, I think it's really healthy. If you look at Coldplay's physical sales for Moon Music, the share of CDs is off the scale. And I'm going to share that with you in a moment. I couldn't believe it, but I don't think the CD has ever died. It's always been there. We sell truckloads of CDs, whether it's Will Young or the Psychedelic Furs, and I think now it's the cheaper physical format. And lots of kids I hear from aren't collecting vinyl because it's too expensive. So they buy the CD instead. Okay, so that's, Cooking Vinyl are one of the good guys. They really do look after their artists and they're a great label. But that's really interesting. Managing director is seeing a huge take off the CDs. And I'm going to talk about Coldplay in a second. The other person I want to mention is Lasgo Chrysalis MD, Gary Elwood, who's told Music with this week. He's in distribution. And obviously distribution is obviously about physical stuff. Obviously, there's no distribution in streaming, and obviously a lot of the Big labels obviously saw this as easy. There's no effort. You just send digital files out. But physically distributing it, a lot of distributors went out of business, but now they're growing again. And what Gary Elwood says in Music Week this month, is CD sales have now stabilized and in fact are starting to grow again. It is a pattern that we expect to continue. And of course, a bit worried about this next statement, of course, there's a resurgence in the audio cassette market as well, as fans clamour to get anything they can relating to their favourite artist. That still baffles me, but I suppose these things are bundled in with other things. But again, if you are buying cassettes on their own, let me know in the comments, of course. He goes on to say, the world is full of collectors. There's a lot of them here. And fans of music in the UK and around the world, I must say, still want to own that album on CD or cassette. Interesting, he says CD or cassette. He doesn't mention vinyl. Interesting. Having that in the collection gives kudos. It does, doesn't it? It's a talking point when people come round to your home and they start browsing through your collection. The digital market cannot offer the hugely popular vinyl variants that are currently being made available. And then, of course, collectors love box sets. And box sets, of course, is the home of the CD. It just works the best, doesn't it? To own a CD or vinyl is like owning your own master of that artist's work. It is, isn't it? You can digitize it, but you have a master copy that is yours. Whatever happens in streaming, if it's suddenly the license disappears and it vanishes, your copy still exists. You're not renting the music. You are owning that part of your journey with that musician. And of course, he says that his renewed confidence is because of larger retailers such as HMV and Rough Trade have invested in new outlets, more shelves, and more physical product is required. Right, let's talk now a little bit finally about the actual sales of CD. Shed 7, which is Cooking Vinyl's artist, their album sold about 28,443 to get to number 1. Of that, 14,955 were CDs and 7,885 were vinyl copies, and there were 142 cassettes, 2,300 downloads and 326 sales equivalent streams. So Shed 7 fans don't really stream, do they? But more of them, literally 2 to 1, bought the CD. I'm deliberately not focusing on rock here. I'm trying to show you how broad this is, that the CD is doing really well. So the next artist is Kylie Minogue with Tension 2. This was sales of 35,242 overall. And 17,818 were CD, and 8,800 were vinyl, and 2,162 were cassettes. Could I be wrong about cassettes? Could be, couldn't I? 4,086 were downloads and 2,271 sales equivalent streams. But yeah, nearly 18,000 CDs sold and 9,000 vinyl albums. Again, the CD is almost 2 to 1, isn't it? Over 2 to 1. But obviously there is more revenue in a vinyl album, which is going to cost about 40 odd pounds. So now I want to end on Coldplay, because the sales for this album to get to number 1 is like the olden days of the charts. This sold in its first week of release 252,529 copies. Now, I've been so used to things getting to number 1 with 25 to 35,000 copies. This was literally over 250,000. 252,529,000. Their 10th album got straight to number 1. Right, so can I break that down? I can indeed. The number of streams was 6,645 and nearly 21,000 people downloaded it. That still leaves a huge chunk, doesn't it? So how does that break down between CD and vinyl? Okay, for vinyl copies, there were 27,248 vinyl albums of the Coldplay album was sold. So that's just over 27,000 vinyl albums. The CD number, are you ready? The CD number was 182,166. 182,000 CDs were sold of Coldplay's new album that got to number 1, compared with 27,000 vinyl albums. So that really doubles down on what the MD from Cooking Vinyl is saying, the distribution guys are saying. The CD is certainly not dead. And I would say now that anybody, any newspaper, any media outlet that decides to run that age-old boring story about the CD being that no one has them anymore, can go and bake some humble pie, because it's actually doing very well. But isn't that amazing? Whatever you might think of Coldplay, and whether you're a fan or not, I know it's a kind of one of those Marmite bands, but there's obviously a lot of people that like them, and that's amazing. Because without the CD, without that 182,000 sales on CD, that album would not have got to number 1. Well, actually, it probably would have done, but it's certainly without having the CD, what kind of shooting yourself in the foot kind of marketing decision would that have been? And as Cooking Vinyl is saying, and lots of other people I work with in the industry are saying, the CD is here to stay, and it is something worth investing in. But isn't it interesting that more young people are now moving towards the CD format, because vinyl albums, and I see them all the time, priced at £49.95. It's £100. I know that's a weird phrase, but it is, isn't it? The whole idea of music in some ways was an impulse buy. And I know things have gone up. But I think the other thing to say here for musicians who are independent, trying to get all this stuff into physical shops is going to be a bit easier as more distribution companies start to come on stream. And specifically the one I mentioned here, we've just taken on a couple more labels as well. So that's great news. So let me know what you think. Are you buying more CDs than vinyl? Is it a mixture? Are you completely CD? Have you just started to buy CDs for the first time? What was the decision making in that? You just like it, or has vinyl started to become a bit more expensive? Or do you see the vinyl one as being like the hardback book in your collection? I usually buy the CD, now buy this. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for being here. Remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Please take care. Subscribe, like, share this with everyone you think might be interested, and I'll talk to you all very, very soon.